The CEO's smile never reached his eyes as he ordered the $200 bottle of wine. 9 years building their company's entire technology from scratch. And this was how it would end. Over prime steak at his favorite restaurant. "We're restructuring the technology division," he said between sips of Cabernet. The owner's niece would be taking my position. Fresh blood, new perspectives, all the usual corporate euphemisms for, "You're expendable." I nodded calmly, even smiled as I signed their confidentiality agreement. "These things happen in business," I replied, raising my water glass in a small toast. What they couldn't see behind my composed expression was the plan already forming. They wanted my job, my team, my systems, but they had overlooked one critical detail about the technology keeping their entire company afloat. A detail that would cost them millions if they continued treating people like replaceable parts. 3 days later, I watched the owner's niece stroll confidently through the office, already examining my work as if it were hers. They'd given her access to everything, almost everything. But the true power of the systems I'd built wasn't in the documentation, and in exactly 14 days, they would learn the painful difference between owning someone's time and owning their creation. My name is Marcus. I'm 38, and for the past 9 years, I've been the technical backbone behind Helix Solutions' remarkable digital transformation. I turned an outdated IT consultancy into a cutting-edge technology firm that consistently outperformed competitors in client retention and innovation. I built our infrastructure when we were still using physical servers and considered cloud computing a security risk. I transformed a 3-person support team into a 25-person technology powerhouse implementing enterprise solutions across 3 continents. The tech business never sleeps in Seattle, and neither did I. I took the job after my startup failed, something to pay the bills while I regrouped. But I discovered I had a talent for translating complex technical solutions into business value. Somewhere along the way, those systems and architectures became mine, not legally, but in every way that mattered. The dinner was at the Capitol Grill, where executives wine and dine clients, not where you dismiss a loyal employee. James Roberts, our CEO, always did care about appearances. "Marcus, your contributions have been extraordinary," he said, barely making eye contact. "But we need fresh perspectives for our AI-first approach. Translation. We found someone with the right family connections who won't push back when the board makes short-sighted decisions. Amanda just completed her master's at Stanford, specialized in artificial intelligence." I nodded thoughtfully. "Who will manage the transition process?" James visibly relaxed. "You'll have 4 weeks. Back at my desk the next morning, I discovered my admin access had already been downgraded and my name removed from leadership emails. That night I couldn't sleep, not from anger or anxiety about finding a new position. I lay awake because of what I'd discovered in January. Unusual access patterns from an executive suite IP address. Someone methodically examining my system architecture documents and proprietary methodologies. Someone wasn't just planning to replace me. They were systematically extracting everything I'd built before showing me the door. I moved to Seattle 12 years ago with my college roommate Kevin after we launched our cybersecurity startup. We were young, ambitious, and thought we could revolutionize how companies protected their data. We had good ideas, but terrible timing. The 2008 recession hit just as we were gaining momentum. When investors pulled out, Kevin took a corporate job in Portland. I stayed behind, our friendship strained by disagreements over the company's direction. When our office lease expired, I was sleeping on my sister's couch, scrolling through job listings, wondering where it all went wrong. Helix Solutions was going through a rough patch when they hired me 9 years ago. They'd lost several major clients after a botched CRM implementation, and their reputation was in shambles. Their IT team consisted of 3 overworked people maintaining legacy systems that crashed weekly. I was supposed to be temporary, a 6-month contract to stabilize their infrastructure. But I saw something in Helix that others missed. Their developers were talented, just hamstrung by outdated processes and poor leadership. The problem was that nobody was bridging the gap between technical capabilities and business needs. I worked 16-hour days for months, completely rebuilding their systems architecture. I implemented modern development practices, created robust security protocols, and designed a scalable cloud infrastructure that could grow with their clients' needs. When a major financial services company signed on after my infrastructure overhaul, the board took notice. James started bringing me to client meetings. My budget increased, and I built a team of talented people like Rachel, who became my right hand, and Eli, our database wizard. We weren't just an IT department anymore. We were technology partners translating complex problems into elegant solutions. Our implementations won industry awards. Client satisfaction scores increased 65% under my leadership. In 2019, Thomas Wilson, the company's founder, shook my hand at the annual holiday party. "You've transformed Helix," he said. "We were always good coders, but you turned us into a real technology company." I thought I'd found my place. Somewhere I made a difference. The first warning sign appeared last November, when an external consultant showed up unannounced to audit our technology stack. The transformation didn't happen overnight. When I first pitched my comprehensive infrastructure overhaul to James in my third month, he was skeptical. "Our clients care about features, not what's happening behind the scenes," he said dismissively. "Focus on fixing what's broken." But I had data showing that reliability and security were becoming primary concerns for enterprise clients. Companies weren't just buying software anymore. They needed trusted technology partners. I convinced James to give me 6 months to prove my approach. I started small, stabilizing their existing systems and eliminating the chronic crashes that plagued client implementations. Then I designed a modular architecture that allowed for rapid deployment of customized solutions. The efficiency gains were immediate. Projects that once took months were completed in weeks. Our breakthrough moment came during the pitch for Next Gen Financial, a client Helix had been trying to land for years. Instead of the traditional approach of showcasing feature lists, we demonstrated how our infrastructure would guarantee 99.99% uptime and enterprise-grade security. The CTO was so impressed he signed a 3-year contract on the spot. Revenue exceeded projections by 52%. The board was impressed, and my budget tripled. I expanded the team, bringing in specialists in cloud architecture, cybersecurity, and AI integration. We established the Helix Innovation Lab, a development environment that became the envy of our competitors. By 2018, our technology approach was case-studied at engineering conferences. I was invited to speak at industry events, representing Helix as the face of its technical transformation. Our implementations consistently won innovation awards, and more importantly, they delivered measurable business value to our clients. When a major industry publication named Helix Most Innovative Technology Solution Provider 3 years in a row, James made sure I was beside him in the photographs. "Marcus is the architect of our technical strategy," he told reporters. "He's transformed how we develop solutions. I built a team that was loyal, brilliant, and committed to excellence." Rachel, my senior architect, could translate business problems into elegant technical solutions. Eli revolutionized our data management systems. Even our newest team members brought fresh ideas while embracing our core development principles. I thought we were unstoppable. Until last November, when the first cracks began to appear. The first red flag appeared when David Murray showed up at our offices last November. He introduced himself as a technical efficiency consultant, hired by the executive team to evaluate our infrastructure. When I asked who had authorized the assessment, he vaguely mentioned the executive committee and changed the subject. His questions were oddly basic for someone supposedly experienced in enterprise architecture. He asked about our deployment pipeline, our security protocols, and our disaster recovery systems, all information readily available in my quarterly reports. It felt less like an audit and more like someone trying to create a user manual for my job. When I mentioned this to James, he waved it off. "Just standard procedure for our annual review, nothing to worry about." Then in December, my access to board meeting minutes suddenly disappeared from our shared drive. "Server reorganization," the IT notification read. When I requested reinstatement, my tickets went unanswered. James began canceling our standing weekly architecture reviews, always with plausible excuses: a conflict with an investor call, a last-minute flight to the San Francisco office, a personal appointment he couldn't reschedule. 1 or 2 cancellations wouldn't have raised suspicions, but after the 5th consecutive week, the pattern was unmistakable. At the January leadership retreat, I overheard Thomas Wilson talking to an executive from our European division. My niece Amanda is finishing her master's program next month, he said proudly. Brilliant with artificial intelligence. Companies like Google and Microsoft have been recruiting her, but family comes first. I didn't think much of it at the time. Nepotism wasn't unusual in the tech industry, and there were always positions opening up in our global offices. It didn't occur to me that they might be discussing my replacement. The most telling warning came from Rachel in February. She'd been invited to a strategic planning session for our upcoming client implementation. A meeting I should have led. When she mentioned needing my input on the architecture, James had quickly changed the subject. Something felt off, she told me later. Like they were strategizing around you, not with you. I brushed it off at the time. Probably just trying to respect my workload. You know how James gets when he has a new technical direction. Loyal to a fault, my ex used to say. They'd been planning my exit for months, and I'd been too dedicated to the company to see it. 3 days after the dinner with James, I was reviewing system logs in our server room when someone knocked on the open door. I turned to find a young woman with confident posture and designer glasses standing in the doorway. "You must be Marcus," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Amanda Wilson." So this was Thomas's niece. She couldn't have been more than 26. The resemblance to her uncle was subtle but unmistakable. The same analytical eyes, the same assured smile. "Just running performance diagnostics," I said, gesturing to the screens displaying our system metrics. "Need something?" "Just getting familiar with the infrastructure." She walked in as if she already belonged there, studying the monitoring dashboards with practiced interest. "James mentioned you'd be showing me around starting Monday." "Did he?" I kept my voice neutral, despite the flash of anger. James hadn't mentioned anything about starting the transition so quickly. Amanda moved closer to examine the metrics displayed on the main screen. Impressive uptime numbers, a bit traditional in architecture, but effective. Traditional. The system had won a Technical Excellence Award last quarter. "I have some thoughts about modernizing our infrastructure," she continued. "More emphasis on containerization, maybe some serverless implementations for the client portals." She spoke as if she were doing me a favor by sharing her wisdom. As if 9 years of building this architecture from nothing could be improved by concepts from a graduate school textbook. "Looking forward to hearing them," I replied, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "Your system documentation is incredibly detailed," she said, scrolling through our architecture diagrams on her tablet. "I've been studying them. Very structured approach to deployment." I froze momentarily. Our updated architecture documentation had only been finalized last week. They weren't yet published to our general server. "Where did you access those?" I asked casually. "James shared the development drive with me." She didn't even look up as she delivered this revelation. "I've been reviewing all your systems and architectures. Very thorough documentation." After she left, I checked the access logs for our development database. Amanda's credentials had been created 3 weeks before my dinner with James. She'd already viewed every architecture diagram, every security protocol, and every proprietary algorithm my team had developed over the past 5 years. That evening, I texted Rachel, "Coffee before work tomorrow? 7 a.m. at Circuit Coffee. Important." Rachel was already at Circuit Coffee when I arrived, 2 espressos on the table and concern in her eyes. We'd worked together for 7 years, long enough that she could read my moods better than most of my family. "You know something," she said as I sat down. Not a question. "They're replacing me with Thomas's niece." I kept my voice low despite the morning rush of customers. "James told me at dinner 3 nights ago." She didn't look surprised. "I figured it was coming. They've been acting strange for months." "How long do you have?" "Officially? 4 weeks. But Amanda already has access to everything. She's been studying our work for weeks." Rachel cursed under her breath. "What's your plan?" I hadn't realized I had one until she asked. But sitting there watching early morning commuters hustle past the window, something settled inside me, a clarity I hadn't felt since finding my startup investor's withdrawal letter. "They think everything's in the documentation," I said quietly, "but we both know it's not." "Figured what out?" Eli's voice came from behind me as he slid into the third chair, uninvited but not unwelcome. "Sorry, saw your text to Rachel. Thought I might be useful." I studied him for a moment. Eli had been with us for 5 years, a database genius who'd turned down Amazon to work on something with more interesting technical challenges. I trusted him, but caution was necessary now. "Marcus is out in 4 weeks," Rachel said bluntly. "Wilson's niece is taking over." Eli's eyes widened. "That's what those weird meetings have been about? They've had me explaining your security protocols, walking through our load balancing system. Said it was for documentation purposes. They've been mining us for information," I said, the full picture finally becoming clear, extracting everything before the transition. "What about NetCore?" Eli asked. NetCore was our proprietary system orchestration tool. I'd developed the initial concept years ago while still running my startup. At Helix, I'd refined it into a sophisticated system that could automate complex deployments with unprecedented reliability. It was central to our success. "That's the thing," I said slowly. "NetCore isn't fully documented. Its core orchestration engine was something I developed before Helix, then adapted here. They'll have the interface, but not the underlying mechanics." Rachel leaned forward. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that what's mine should stay mine." The plan was taking shape in my mind. I'm not going to sabotage anything, but I'm not giving away my intellectual property either. Eli nodded. "What do you need from us?" "First, I need to know who else I can trust." I looked between them. "Then I need documentation of what I brought to Helix versus what I developed here." "I'm in," Rachel said without hesitation. "Me too," added Eli. "They think we're all replaceable parts. Let's show them otherwise." The pieces fell into place faster than I expected. With Rachel and Eli's help, I discovered the full extent of what was happening behind the scenes. Eli found an email chain accidentally left on a shared drive, communications between James and Gregory Parker, CEO of Quantum Systems, our largest competitor. The subject line read simply, "Acquisition Terms, Final Review." "They're selling the company," I told Rachel as we reviewed the documents in my apartment that weekend. "Quantum is acquiring Helix, and our technology stack is a key selling point." Rachel scrolled through the valuation reports. "Look at this. They've specifically highlighted our system reliability metrics and scalable architecture as major assets justifying the purchase price." The acquisition memo mentioned proprietary deployment methodologies and innovative orchestration tools as core components of the valuation. They were selling NetCore, my system, without even owning it completely. "There's more," Eli said, showing us internal communications from Thomas Wilson. The company founder had liquidated most of his shares 3 months ago, right around when the external consultant had appeared. He's cashing out before the acquisition is announced. The executives would receive generous compensation packages and cushy positions at Quantum. Meanwhile, the acquisition memo outlined staffing optimizations, corporate speak for layoffs, targeting 30% of current employees. My entire team was at risk. What broke me wasn't the acquisition itself. Companies get bought and sold every day. It was finding emails showing James and Thomas had discussed replacing me over 7 months ago, while I was working weekends to fix a critical security vulnerability that threatened our entire client base. "We need someone more aligned with Quantum's technical direction," James had written. "Someone with connections to their leadership team." Thomas's response was blunt. "Amanda graduates in February." Perfect timing. They'd been planning this while patting me on the back, while I was sacrificing my personal life for their company's success. I drove to the waterfront that night, parked where I used to sketch system architectures when I needed inspiration. The city lights reflected on the dark water as I thought about my options. The next morning, I contacted Daniel Winters, an intellectual property attorney I'd met at a tech conference last year. We met for coffee away from the office, and I laid out the situation. "Legally, you're in a tricky position," Daniel said after reviewing my documents. "But there's something that doesn't add up. Why push you out when the company's performing so well, and why now?" "That's what I need to find out," I replied, "and I need to protect what's mine in the process." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Let me look into some things. Meanwhile, document everything, especially anything related to NetCore that predates your employment at Helix." With 3 weeks remaining before my official departure, I began methodically documenting and securing everything related to my intellectual property. My first step was recovering the original code and concept documents for NetCore from an old external hard drive I'd kept from my startup days. The timestamps and development logs clearly showed I'd created the core orchestration engine 8 months before joining Helix. Next, I compiled emails where James had explicitly acknowledged NetCore as my proprietary tool that was being licensed to Helix. "Once we formalize your position, we'll draw up proper licensing terms," he'd written in my second month. That formalization never happened. I'd trusted his word and focused on building the infrastructure instead. Daniel helped me file provisional patents on key aspects of NetCore, not the entire system, but the unique components that made it so effective at automating complex deployments across heterogeneous environments. "This establishes your ownership claim," he explained. "If they try to transfer these components to Quantum without proper compensation, you'll have legal standing." Meanwhile, Eli was helping me create a secure, independent version of NetCore that would run outside Helix's infrastructure. "I've added digital signature verification," he explained as we worked late in his apartment. "The system will authenticate that it hasn't been modified by unauthorized users." By Tuesday of my second to last week, I had completed all the documentation and transition materials Amanda had requested. I attended her planning meetings, answered questions politely, and maintained the appearance of a model departing employee. What Amanda didn't realize was that I'd only documented the surface-level operations, not the nuanced understanding that made our systems so reliable. I wasn't withholding information that belonged to Helix. I was simply not giving away my personal expertise and intellectual property. On Wednesday evening, I added the final piece to my preparation, a license expiration protocol for the NetCore components I'd developed pre-Helix. The system would continue functioning normally until my last official day, then would require proper licensing authentication to continue operating at full capacity. This wasn't sabotage. The basic functions would still work. But the advanced orchestration capabilities, the heart of what made our deployment so reliable, would require formal recognition of my ownership and fair compensation. That night, I received an unexpected email from Michael Chen, Quantum Systems Vice President of Engineering. "We've heard you're leaving Helix and would be interested in discussing consultant opportunities. Your reputation in system architecture is exceptional." Someone at Quantum was hedging their bets, reaching out to me directly while their acquisition plans proceeded. I forwarded the email to Daniel, then replied to Michael suggesting we meet after my departure from Helix was finalized. He agreed immediately. With everything in place, I was ready for whatever came next. I wasn't seeking revenge, just recognition of my contributions and protection of what was rightfully mine. The final blow came sooner than expected. On Thursday morning, I received a calendar invitation for a meeting with James, Amanda, and Sarah from HR. "We're accelerating the transition timeline," James announced without preamble when I arrived. "Tomorrow will be your last day." 2 weeks early, I noted calmly. "Any particular reason?" Sarah cleared her throat. "Amanda has demonstrated exceptional capability in understanding our system's architecture. And frankly, Marcus, your participation in transition meetings has been less than enthusiastic." I maintained my composure. "I see. We'll need you to finalize all documentation and system access instructions by end of day," Amanda added, her tone professional but with an undercurrent of triumph. I nodded slowly. "And what about ownership of NetCore? Have you had time to review the original development documentation I provided?" James's expression hardened. "Our legal team has determined that all integrated systems fall under company ownership. The separation package is generous, Marcus. I suggest you take it." I stood, gathering my laptop. "I'll have my attorney review everything." "Don't make this difficult," James warned. "It won't change the outcome." As I walked back to my office, I texted Rachel and Eli. Acceleration initiated. Tomorrow is my last day. By lunchtime, word had spread throughout the department. Team members stopped by my office, expressions ranging from shocked to angry. I assured each of them that I was fine and would be in touch soon. I spent the afternoon methodically documenting my final transition notes, while Rachel quietly backed up key evidence of my pre-Helix development work. At 5:30, I sent an email to James confirming completion of all transition tasks. That evening, I met with Daniel at his office to finalize our strategy. "They're rushing this because they're worried," he observed. "The provisional patents we filed last week have them spooked." "What's our next move?" I asked. "They're betting you'll take the money and walk away quietly," he replied. "Let's let them think they've won. For now." The next morning I turned in my badge, signed the exit paperwork, and declined the goodbye lunch Amanda had organized. James looked visibly relieved when I didn't make a scene. As I walked to my car, Eli called. "It's done," he said. "Amanda just changed all the admin passwords. They're doing a full system review this afternoon." "Thanks for letting me know," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we wait," I replied. I spent the weekend at home, ignored calls from unknown numbers, and slept better than I had in months. On Monday morning at 9:17, exactly when 3 major client deployments were scheduled, every instance of NetCore across Helix's operations displayed the same message: "License expired. Please contact developer to renew." By 9:30, the first client deployment had failed. By 10:15, all 3 were reporting critical errors. At 10:45, James called me personally. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "I didn't do anything," I replied calmly. "The software license expired. As the developer and owner of NetCore, I'm happy to discuss renewal terms." "This is sabotage," James hissed through the phone. "It's standard license management," I corrected him. "Check the original integration agreement from 9 years ago. Section 12 specifically states that Helix was licensing the core orchestration technology, not purchasing it outright." There was silence on the line, followed by muffled voices as James presumably consulted with someone in the room. "I've sent a proper licensing agreement to your legal department," I continued. "The terms are simple: recognition of my ownership, appropriate compensation for continued use, and a non-disclosure agreement regarding the circumstances of my departure." "You're holding our client deployments hostage," James accused. "I'm protecting my intellectual property," I replied. "These things happen in business, as you well know." I could almost hear him calculating the costs. Failed deployments for 3 major clients, potential contract penalties, the risk to the quantum acquisition if word got out that their prized technical asset wasn't actually theirs to sell. "How quickly can you fix this?" he asked finally, his voice strained. "I can reactivate the full functionality remotely as soon as the agreement is signed," I said. "The basic system functions should still be working, just not the advanced orchestration that makes complex deployments possible." "I'll have legal review your terms immediately," James said tersely, and hung up. I spent the next 3 hours at my kitchen table, reviewing the details of my meeting with Michael Chen scheduled for the following day. At 2:45 p.m., Daniel called. "They've signed," he said, a note of triumph in his voice. "Full recognition of your ownership, a licensing fee structure based on usage metrics, and explicit language preventing them from transferring or selling your technology without additional compensation." "And the NDA?" I asked. "Signed as well. They can't discuss the circumstances of your departure or make any disparaging remarks." I nodded, satisfied. "I'll reactivate the system." Using the secure access portal Eli had helped me create, I removed the license restriction from NetCore. I sent a brief email to James confirming the system was now fully operational. Within 20 minutes, all 3 client deployments were back on track. The following day, I met Michael Chen at Quantum Systems' downtown office. He slid a contract across the table before we'd even ordered coffee. "We're still acquiring Helix," he said without preamble, "but we want you to lead their technical integration as a consultant, not an employee." I scanned the terms: twice my former salary at Helix, complete control over my working schedule, and explicit recognition of my ownership of NetCore. "What about Amanda?" I asked. Michael's expression soured slightly. "Ms. Wilson will be transitioning to a different role that better aligns with her experience level." Translation: they'd discovered her graduate degree wasn't quite the magic solution they'd been promised. "I'll need to bring in my own team for certain aspects of the integration," I said, thinking of Rachel and Eli. "That can be arranged," Michael replied. "We're more interested in results than corporate hierarchy." I signed the contract that afternoon. As I drove home, I felt not the vindication I'd expected, but a quiet certainty that I'd done what was necessary to protect what I'd built. 3 weeks after signing with Quantum, I received a text from Rachel. "Check your email. You won't believe this." The message contained a forwarded company-wide announcement. Amanda Wilson had been reassigned to strategic research initiatives, a vague role with no team and no clear responsibilities. The official reason cited was organizational restructuring to align with post-acquisition goals. "What happened?" I texted back. "2 major systems failures in the past week," she replied. "The client portal crashed during a demo for our biggest prospect. Then the automated deployment system failed during a critical update. Michael was in the room for both. Apparently, after the second crash, he just stood up and walked out without saying a word." I wasn't surprised. NetCore was running, but without someone who truly understood its architecture, they were only accessing its basic functionality. The sophisticated orchestration that prevented conflicts and ensured reliability required deeper knowledge than what appeared in the documentation. The following day, Michael called me personally. "We need you to start sooner than planned," he said without preamble. "How quickly can you come on board?" "I can begin next Monday," I replied. "But I'll need to bring Rachel Chen and Eli Novak with me." "Already approved," he said. "Whatever you need to make this work." I spent the weekend preparing a comprehensive integration plan, not just for NetCore, but for Helix's entire technical infrastructure. When I arrived at the office on Monday, James was nowhere to be seen. "He's been moved to an advisory role at headquarters," Michael explained when I asked. "No direct operational responsibilities." Translation: a ceremonial position to save face, with no real authority. Throughout the next month, I methodically rebuilt the systems that had begun to fail. With Rachel and Eli by my side, we created proper documentation, trained the remaining team members, and implemented a sustainable architecture that wouldn't depend on any single person's knowledge. In my 6th week, Thomas Wilson approached me after a leadership meeting. He seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. "The acquisition wouldn't have happened without your systems," he said finally. "I should have recognized that sooner." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was as close as I was likely to get. "It wasn't about recognition," I replied. "It was about respect, for me and for the team who built it with me." He nodded once, then walked away. By the 2-month mark, Rachel, Eli, and I had established our consulting team as an essential component of Quantum's technical strategy. We weren't employees but partners, respected for our expertise and compensated accordingly. One Friday evening, as we were celebrating a successful deployment, Eli raised his glass. "To knowing your worth," he said, "and refusing to settle for less." I thought about that dinner at the Capitol Grill, about James's casual dismissal of 9 years of my life. I thought about all the nights and weekends I'd sacrificed, the vacations I'd canceled, the relationships I'd neglected, all for a company that had seen me as disposable. "To boundaries," I added, raising my glass in return, "and to building something that's truly yours." 6 months after that fateful dinner, our consulting firm, Core Integration Partners, had grown beyond just supporting the Helix Quantum merger. We'd added 2 more senior engineers and were fielding inquiries from other technology companies facing similar integration challenges. I used the first significant payment from our Quantum contract to put a down payment on a small cabin overlooking Lake Washington. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet place with a deck where I could watch the sunset and code without interruptions. It was the first home I'd owned since selling everything to fund my startup years ago. Rachel and Eli had become full partners in the firm, each bringing their unique expertise to our growing client base. Eventually, 5 more former Helix employees joined us, drawn by our reputation for technical excellence and a culture that valued work-life balance. I ran into James Roberts at a tech conference about a year after everything had happened. He looked different, the confident swagger replaced by a subdued demeanor, his designer suit slightly rumpled. He started to turn away when he saw me, then stopped and approached. "You were right," he said without preamble, "about NetCore, about how the systems worked. The acquisition would have fallen apart without your intervention." I studied him, surprised by the admission. "It wasn't personal," I replied. "It was about protecting what I'd built. Quantum downsized my role, he continued, a hint of bitterness in his voice. I'm basically a figurehead now. I nodded, unsure what response he was looking for. Things have a way of coming full circle. Your new firm is doing well from what I hear, he said, glancing at my conference badge with our company logo. We're selective about our clients, I replied. But yes, we're doing well. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before he finally extended his hand. No hard feelings? I shook it briefly, just lessons learned. As he walked away, I thought about how different things might have been if he'd simply valued what I'd brought to Helix, if he'd seen me as a partner rather than a resource to be exploited and discarded. That evening, I hosted our company's quarterly dinner at my cabin. As we sat on the deck watching the sunset over the lake, I looked around at the team we'd built. Rachel was explaining a complex architecture concept to our newest engineer. Eli was debating cloud security best practices with our operations lead. Everyone was engaged, respected, valued for their expertise. Something on your mind? Rachel asked, noticing my contemplative expression. Just thinking about what we've built, I replied. Not just the technology, but this. I gestured to the group around us. Worth getting fired for? She asked with a half smile. I considered the question, watching the last rays of sunlight shimmer across the water. I wasn't fired, I said finally. I was freed. Later, as everyone was leaving, Eli paused at the door. You know what the best part is? He said. We're building systems that will outlast any single company. That's the real legacy. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In the end, it wasn't about Helix or Quantum or even Netcore. It was about creating something of lasting value and having the courage to stand up for it when others tried to claim it as their own. Some lessons come at a high price, but knowing your true worth, that's priceless.